Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. I hope you're doing well, and if you're not, I hope you are soon. Okay, today we are going to take a quick look at Tales of the Arabian Nights, and this is the Z-Man edition. This is one of the few games that I actually sold at the end of one of my board game collections, one of my phases, and repurchased at the beginning of another. This is a fantastic game of wild adventure. And in a lot of ways, I can see Tales of the Arabian Nights kind of being a good training exercise for solo role-playing, because it does require the player to connect some dots, to use their imagination, to make the stories make sense, because there are a ton of random elements that go into each game of Tales of the Arabian Nights. And the more you are able to stretch your imagination and just kind of enjoy the random things that happen, the more fun you will have. Adventure. Sail the seven seas with Sinbad. Become the new Shahrazad. And match wits with the Mad Sultan. Find the fabulous treasures of Aladdin's Cave of Wonders. Seek love, honor, danger, and glory. All await you in the golden age of fable. This is a very, very beautiful game. I always have fun playing it, and it's been a long time since I have played it, and it's been too long, and I had an absolute blast playing this game today. So in this game, I played as Shahrazad, and I played as Ali Baba. When I play this game solo, I usually play two-handed. I just like to see which one of my characters can complete their quests and their goals first. In a normal game of Tales of the Arabian Nights, the players are competing to get a certain number of destiny points and story points. In a normal game, you will be playing to get 20 of those points in any combination. So you could have 10 story or 10 destiny and so on. I like to play a quicker game, and I usually play to 10 points total. So you have a track down here that's going to keep track of your story points, and a track on the opposite side of the board there that's going to keep track of your destiny points. And so I play to where the combination of the two will equal 10, and that is usually a pretty quick game. In addition to that, at the beginning of the game, each character is going to draw a quest. And in my game, I also play that you have to solve at least one quest and get a total of those 10 points. And once you do that, you have to return to Baghdad in order to declare yourself the winner of the adventure. And in this game right here, Shahrazad had won, and she had a really, really cool adventure that everything kind of made a narrative sense. So let's take a look at what she did. And this will kind of give you an idea of the kind of game this is, just in case you don't know. So all characters start in Baghdad. And my initial quest for Shahrazad was I needed to seek love. I needed to find my lover and get married. And she had to go out and adventure in spaces that had a higher number. Each one of these spaces on the board has a number. And when you land on that space, that is a number that you get to add to an adventure roll that is going to determine the kind of random adventure that you are going to have. Well, for her quest, every time I had a random adventure at a certain location, I would again roll a d6 and add the number to that total. And if I ever scored 9 or more, then I would have found my love and settled down to get married. So as the numbers get bigger, you have better chances of having kind of more dangerous encounters, but with better payoff. So there is a little bit of rhyme and reason to the numbered spaces. But a lot of this game, as many players know, is full on random adventure mode. And sometimes things just go absolutely crazy, but sometimes things make a little bit of sense. So in my game with Shahrazad today, I first traveled over here past the city of Zaranj and into this location here because it was a high location number to try to find my love there. And while there, I met this wicked sage, and the wicked sage imprisoned me. And then I had to pay off the jailer. I paid off the jailer and made a roll. And it turned out that I found my love in jail. And so I actually pretended that it was the jailer who freed me, and we fell in love. And then we moved to Herat here, where Herat became my city of origin. So that's where my house was. I became married and I became a vizier. And so this meant that I was kind of like stuck in this city. I could adventure around the area, but every time that I would have an adventure in a neighboring city, I had to go back to my hometown to kind of check in to see what was going on. And when you're married, you can start having children. And one of my children I had was as ugly as an elderly camel. And I became grief-stricken, but then I drew a new quest and I wanted to seek adventure. And so I was like, screw this married life. I'm heading out again. I got wanderlust and I went out and had more adventures. And eventually she got enough points to win and made it back to Baghdad. So that was her adventure during this game. At one point, I also tricked a mad wizard into investing in a scheme with me, but he ended up pulling a fast one on me, and I ended up the game very poor, but in Baghdad. And the winner, Ali Baba, he had a much tougher time, and his quest was to visit a number of islands. He wanted to fill the pool of the sea. And you would put these quest tokens at various islands. I just kind of like picked them randomly. And then I had to go to each one of those islands and have an adventure. But I went to the first island here and I weathered a storm, but I was hit with debris and I woke up diseased and insane. And then I kind of wandered around this region. He ended up getting a lot of city cards, and these city cards allow you to go to different cities and roll for a random thing to happen at the city. So he finally made it over to Cordoba. And at Cordoba, he was able to, no, actually he went up to Leon first, to Leon here, or Leon. And he was able to lose any statuses that he wished. So he was able to get healed of his disease and his insanity. And then he learned of a rumor of the Sepulchre of Solomon, which these are these places of power. And these are these very magical places that exist in the land. And you could only enter one of those if you get the proper invitation, if you learn the rumor, if you learn where they are. And there's a number of those. There's the Sepulchre of Solomon. There's the Jeweled Fortress, the Lake of Colors. There is the Undersea Kingdom, the Cave of Wonders, and so on. But he made it to the Sepulchre of Solomon, and he tried to steal King Solomon's ring, but he didn't have enough skill, and so he got shunted out of there and washed up to the shore of Cordoba, penniless and with nothing to his name, basically. And so he, poor Ali Baba there had kind of a bad adventure, but it was still a lot of fun. And I was able to at least visit one of the places of power. That's always something that is fun to do in these games. So the characters are pretty cool in this game. I actually enjoy them quite a bit. They don't have a ton of things that make them different, except for the skills that you get to pick. So at the beginning of the game, you get 2 skills, or is it 3? I can't remember if it's 2 or 3. 3. You get 3 skills at the base level. And so Shahrazad here, she took acting in disguise, storytelling, and beguiling. And those skills basically are like, well, they are keywords. And for those of you familiar with game books, these keywords will often unlock additional options that you can take when you have one of the random adventures. So you might say, okay, I'm going to try to trick a wizard. And the game book will say, okay, do you have the acting and disguise skill? And if you do, then you get to read an additional paragraph that usually allows you to do something better. And throughout the course of her adventure, she also learned bargaining and evaluation. When she got married, she gained wisdom, courtly graces, and I also chose scholarship. So she ended up with quite a few skills at the end of her adventure. Whereas Alibaba, I started him out with quick thinking, stealth and stealing, and luck. And he ended up with no additional skill. So once again, he had kind of the bummer adventure. That always happens. That always seems to happen in this game because there's so much luck and randomness. One player, one character has a grand adventure, the kind of adventure that you want to read about in the book, the kind of a grand, heroic, epic quest. And another adventurer ends up getting sex changed or turned into a monkey and is floundering around, having all kinds of terrible things happen to them. And that was Alibaba, this game here. So another thing that I do when I play solo is, in a normal game, you have 3 different time periods. You have morning, you have noon, and you have evening. And in a solo game, you are usually not going to see each one of these time periods, because the time period changes when you make your way the way through the encounter deck entirely. So you have to go through this entire deck before morning turns into noon, and then once again before noon turns into evening. This can be a very long game with 4 players playing up to 20 points. So I do not ever recommend playing like that. But what I like to do for my solo games when I am playing, I take the deck of encounter cards and I divide them into, take a subset of them and divide them into 3 different stacks, and then assign each stack morning, noon, and evening. And then as I work my way through this small stack, then morning has ended, and then I go on to noon. When I make my way through this substack, noon has ended, and then evening begins. And then once I'm done with all of those cards, then I take the remaining cards and again do it again. So I can go through a number of different days, because some of these cards will have different things that happen depending on the time of day. And so it's kind of fun just to see the differences and see how things change depending on when you encounter them. But all of these encounter cards are divided into, you have encounters in cities, you have encounters in different regions, and you have encounters with different kinds of people. And then those are going to tell you, depending on what type of terrain you are in, then you are going to take a look at the Book of Tales here, which is this giant book of thousands of paragraphs. This is one of the great kind of work of interactive fiction. It's very random, but it's very cool. You will often be told at first to look up one of these initial paragraphs that will give you an option of 12 different things. And then once you figure out which paragraph you're going to do, you roll a d6, you add any bonuses to that, you look up that number, so a bloodthirsty enchantress, and then you look at Matrix O, and Matrix O will give you a listing of all the different ways you can interact with this bloodthirsty enchantress. So you could grovel, you could aid, you could avoid, you can bargain, attack, trick, or hire. And then depending on what you choose, so you find bloodthirsty on these matrices here, the reaction matrices. If it was bloodthirsty and you wanted to avoid the bloodthirsty, enchantress, then you would turn to paragraph 1422. But before doing that, you roll the fate die. And this gives you a little bit of variety in your encounter. You roll it. If you roll a blank, you turn to that exact paragraph, so 1422. If you roll plus, you go 1 over, so 1423. And if you rolled a negative, you go 1 under, which would be 1421. So let's see, let's go to 1422, or let's roll this 1421. Okay, so usually the negatives are a little worse. So you go to 1421. Let's see how I handled the bloodthirsty enchantress here. you are awestruck. Okay, so if you have a protective talisman, a protective talisman is one of the many treasures that you can get while you are playing. And the treasures are all really cool. They will usually give you some kind of passive bonus that you can use on your turn. And they will also unlock additional things that you can do in the storybook. So if you had no skill, you would go to paragraph 380. So I didn't have that charm here. So let's go to paragraph 380 and see what would happen to me from the bloodthirsty enchantress. It's always references the NPC or the thing you are interacting with as the other. So the bloodthirsty enchantress is far too awesome to escape or beat. No matter where you turn, she is there grinning at you. And then you have to go through this little adventure here. If you did have the protective talisman, the bloodthirsty enchantress is a powerful foe and attacks you with equally powerful charms. However, they are turned aside by the blessing of the protective talisman. Eventually, the bloodthirsty enchantress tires of the attack and departs. You have learned many of her magical secrets. So you would gain a destiny point, you would gain a story point, and you would gain the talent of magic. And magic is another skill that you get to add to your character. And so there are just all kinds of super cool adventures to have in this game. This Book of Tales really is a book of wonder. It is a book of adventure. And every new game you play, every time you set up your character and you depart from Baghdad, you really never know what is going to happen in this game. There are some things you can do to make some logical choices depending on your skill, depending on which quest you have. This will give you some direction that you want to take at the beginning of the game. So there is a little bit of game here, but if you overthink it, if you try to really strategize to win, if you are really concerned about mitigating a lot of the luck, then you're probably going to have a bad time. But if you kind of go with the flow and you work to connect the dots between all the various random things that happen, and you enjoy random encounters, this is a really tough game to beat. Another very fun but can also be frustrating thing, depending on how you feel, are these statuses. And so there are a number of different statuses, like wounded. You can become a sultan. You can become sex changed. You can become pursued on a pilgrimage. You can become lost or insane, grief-stricken, ensorcelled, enslaved, determined, crippled, beloved. You can turn into a beast, or you can become accursed. And these will also dictate, these will change up the way you have to play the game, because you will be limited in what you can do, or they will allow you to do different things depending on the statuses that you gain. You could also, another house rule that I've seen people play with is they limit the number of statuses. Like say, the most statuses you can be inflicted with is 2 at a time, because you can have a really bad time where you can have like 4 or 5 negative statuses, and it's really hard to get rid of some of them. And so that can be kind of a downer for people who are just not having. Sometimes these games just don't work out. You know, sometimes games like this, sometimes games like Talisman, sometimes games like Runebound, sometimes they just don't work out. And you have to be willing to have fun even when bad stuff is happening. And it can still be fun just because of how random and crazy the things that happen in this game are. But yes, so this was just a quick look at an old classic, Tales of the Arabian Nights, a game that I always have fun playing, but a game that I haven't played in a long time, and I'm super glad that I did. And it just reminded me of how much fun this game can be. And it reminded me that this is a game that I need to play a lot more, especially if you play a shorter game with a couple house rules. Then the game is only about an hour and a half. And if you play 2 characters, you really get to experience 2 completely different stories that are going on. And I really enjoy that. So, all right, guys, well, hope you enjoyed taking a look at Tales of the Arabian Nights. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.